Well, good morning. I'm so delighted to see so many people and so many of my friends. Thank you so much for coming. I'm a little nervous, but I'm sure that I will kind of calm down, and so bear with me if I stumble. But before I start, I just want to quickly point out to you, I brought some books, just color books of Munich and of Bavaria. Feel free to look at them. And I also have a picture of my daughters when they were little, and pictures now that they are grown, and they're very recent pictures. They're from Christmas last year. There is a little red book. It's you call it an autograph book, but we call it a poesy album. And when I was growing up, school friends and family would put little poems in there with pictures. So feel free and take a look at them. It's kind of fun to see their... Pardon?
Can you wait?
Sure.
I have to get the rest of the people.
Yeah.
I'm ahead of myself.
Last year they had this, they broke off this this year they found the weather
There are 6, 7 chairs up front. Please move forward so you can hear better and see better. Good morning. How wonderful to see the group here today. I am delighted with some familiar faces and some new ones. Thank you so much for coming. When we put our Wild Winter Wednesday programs together, we decided we would focus on 4 general topics. The first one was travel. And it began with Ron and Connie Kane telling us how they were on a cruise ship. I'll bet you're watching. On a 28-day trip around Australia. Last week, we learned how to make Oli bowling. Were any of you here for the Oli bowling? It was fun. I predict that none of you went home to try it, right? So the second general topic is food. The third one is immigrants, and that's where we are now. We are with immigrant stories. I am part of a discussion group in Clinton, and I had said to the group, I'm looking for immigrant stories, and immediately Ida said, I'm an immigrant. And so she is our program today. Her name is Ida Lorenz. If you get the Clinton Herald, there was an article about her that was about that long, which a friend duplicated for me, and it's back there. I didn't want you to read it ahead of time because I'm sure she's going to tell us exactly the same thing. Right? Our fourth area of interest on which we booked speakers is adventures. Trudy's got the long article.
How long was it?
The size of it.
How long did you think it was?
Next week we're doing Tombstone Adventures by Mike Carney, who's sitting here in the front row. Which reminds me, where's Judy? I saw her come in. He'd like to talk to you today too. Are you going to be here for the whole program or not?
No, I have to leave early, so I'll get
Okay. And then we began our 4 general themes again. We have several of the presenters here today even, so please come again. We always, except last week, we begin with coffee, tea, some kind of treat, and at about 9:15 we come back here for a 1-hour presentation, and you are gone by 10:30, 11, something like that. So here is, if you read the Clinton Herald, you know all about her. Here is Ida Lorenz, who is going to talk to you about being an immigrant. She told me she was born during World War II. Boy, what an old lady she is. We're delighted to have you. Thank you so much for coming.
Thank you, Nancy, for the nice introduction. To refer to the article in the paper, people have walked up to me and said, "Why do they always spell your name wrong?" Well, the thing is my name is Ida. It's spelled I-D-A, but the German way of pronouncing Ida is Ida. And that's really the only thing I like to stick with. I prefer Ida over Ida. So, and you probably heard about Liza Minnelli. She did kind of the same thing, you know. It's L-I-Z-A. And she wants it Liza, not Lisa. So anyway, enough of that. Well, Nancy asked me to tell you also a little bit about my hometown. And I was kind of a little worried about that because you have to remember I left Germany for good in '77. So you can do the math, it's been a while. I have been back. But mainly when I go back to Germany, I visited family, and I really didn't take the time to tour Munich or Bavaria. I went there to see my family. I have someone here, Marlies, my friend Marlies. She goes back to Munich at least once a year. So if you ever have a question about Munich, how often the S-Bahn runs, or how good the subway works, she'll be able to answer that. So, anyway, a little bit about myself. As Nancy mentioned, I was born during World War II. I kind of was a furlough baby. My dad was drafted into the military in '39 under the pretense that he was just going to be trained for a home guard. Well, that home guard training lasted for over 6 years. I also have two brothers. They're quite a bit older than myself, 14 and 12 years older. So my older brother, during the war, he was also drafted when he was 16. And he and my dad both were prisoners of war. My dad with the Americans, my brother with the French. Unfortunately, his incarceration, if you want to call it that, lasted for almost 2 years, whereas with my dad it was only about 6 months. So, and I don't want to go into that, but their experience, my dad's experience was not a problem, but my brother's was really bad. Since I was born in Munich and the Allies bombed Munich, we lost our home. My parents lost their home 3 times, and we ended up in a small town where my mom was born, which is called Penzberg. My early childhood was being here and there, and a lot of fear and so on, and I'm sure that somehow had a little effect on me. We finally ended up going back to Munich after there was housing available, because my dad and my brother worked in Munich. They had to commute. So finally we moved to Munich, and I started school there. And I lived near that castle. It's called Nymphenburg. So just a little bit about what my family did. My dad was an accountant. My mom was a homemaker. My brothers were working. One of them went to college. The other one was a career counselor. But anyway, for recreation, we would walk to that castle, and it took probably close to a half an hour, and that was our recreation. I also had an aunt living near a lake, and that's where I spent my summer vacations, and I loved it. It was right on the lake. I could swim, I could play with the goat that my aunt had, and I had all kinds of food available to me that I probably didn't get in Munich, like apples and peaches and cherries and all that. My dad was very much into culture. He always took me to museums. He made sure that I had a chance to see performances, go to concerts, because my uncle was connected with the Munich Philharmonics. So that was kind of my cultural background. Sport was not a big issue in my family. My dad loved to whistle and he loved to dance, and he would do for me the Bavarian dances where you slap your heels and your thighs and all that. He was really good at that. So that's basically it about us growing up. My parents, of course, are deceased, and unfortunately I also lost my older brother. My younger brother still lives in Germany with his family near Lake Chiemsee, which is in southeastern Bavaria. Okay, now, once I grew up, once I finished school, 10th grade or Realschule, that's when my life actually changed. Because what followed after that really shaped my life. And I'm really grateful for all the experiences that I had, because I personally feel if I had stayed in Munich, who knows what my life would have been. So this is really exciting to, as painful or as heartbreaking it is to leave your family, it's also a wonderful adventure to start kind of a new life in a new culture. So, because I had English in school, and I was ready to go into the workforce, it was a great opportunity to work for the American Army. Requirement was, of course, education, but also a knowledge of English, so I got hired, and I worked in the Department for Customs. Just a little bit about that. At that time in '58, and even before and after that, the American personnel or soldiers had access to tax-free items, and of course the most popular and most coveted were cigarettes and alcoholic beverages, and because there was no tariff or no taxes on it, the Germans were not supposed to buy that. But of course some of the soldiers were trying to make some money, and there were connections, and so anyway, to prevent any kind of abuse of that, that's why customs existed. And so the military police had a department for customs, and of course they worked together with the German customs. The reason why I decided to work for the Americans, it was, oh my God, first of all, there was a lot more money to be made. And there was that allure of everything American at that time. Oh my God. I mean, when I was younger, we always played cowboy and Indians. And in my opinion, I thought every American had a horse. Every American had a horse. And so we would pretend we were the cowboys and the Indians, and we would go to the movies, and we saw the sign of Zorro and stuff like that. And of course then there was my first American cartoon was Snow White, remember that? And then the very first American movie, the big one that I saw, was Gone with the Wind, and that did it to me. I mean, I was just so enchanted, and from that time on, not only did I see the movie, but I read the book probably 3-4 times. I could remember everybody's name, what they did, everything. And then from then on, I would also read a lot of books about the pioneers and stories of settlers and so on. It was just great. And then as I became a teenager, of course, I started to be interested in movie stars, the music. Man, that was cool. James Dean, he was so cool, because we didn't say cool in those days. Then, of course, there were all the other movie stars that, Liz Taylor and so on. So, And because of the movies, I was also interested in the American way of life. So when I started to work for the Americans, I really got to meet Americans. It was great. Just a little bit, Munich had 3 or 4 bases, army bases. They were former German Kasernen or bases, and then the Americans took over. And the one closest to where I was McGraw Kaserne, remember that? And, but where I worked was more like closer to downtown Munich. My job really is to do office work and also do translations. And usually I translated from statements either from English into German, or sometimes when German customs official came to the office, then I would have to translate their conversations. And I enjoyed that. I mean, the people were super nice and friendly, and it was a lot of fun. Of course, that place where I worked also had a army cafeteria. As a German national, I was not allowed to go in there, but since I worked with Americans, they would give me my first real American ice cream. And I tasted my first popcorn. I had hamburgers and French fries, and wow, Coke. What a treat. Coca-Cola. And then remember the hoop skirts and the little twin sets where you would button the sweater in the back? Oh yeah, I did all that. It was great. And then there were the office parties. Wow. Compared to the German office parties at Christmas time, they were so quiet and so nice, whereas with the Americans, it was a ball. That was my first introduction to all the songs of Christmas, and then also I fell in love with Mitch Miller, remember that group, and Burl Ives, and I tried to remember all the lyrics, and I don't know why I did it, but I liked it. And so as time went on, in '60 I met my husband, and that's mentioned in that little column. He walked in with one of my colleagues, and he turned to him and he said, "You're right, you win the bet." Well, the bet was that this colleague said that I'm cute. Well, so of course he asked me out, and I knew my parents would not like that at all. You know, they didn't. In fact, they didn't really like it that much that I worked for the Americans because, well, anyway, I'll go to that later. My first date with my husband was he took me to a movie. I think that was very intentional because the movie was a scary one. And I'm sure some of you have seen The Pit and the Pendulum. Oh my God, I hung on him. I had my head in his shoulders. It was scary. I mean, Vincent Price did a good job. And it worked for him. Meaning my husband. His name is Gene. And he also took me to my first fancy restaurant. Because, like I said, money was scarce, and going out to eat was just not part of my parents' budget. In fact, the only time I went out to eat was at my first communion and when I had my confirmation. And that was, one was in the city hall, and the other one was at the English garden. Still remember that, and I got to ride the boat. So that was fun. Anyway. When my parents found out that I was dating an American soldier, or that, you know, or seeing one, of course they wanted to know everything about him. And they didn't, like I said, they did not like that idea, because girls that dated American soldiers did not have a good reputation. And why? Well, why? Because if you dated an Ami, there was no guarantee that he would marry you. A lot of the girls got pregnant and were left behind. And then the other thing my parents said, well, who is this guy? I mean, he can tell you anything. There's no way you can find out where he's from, what he's doing and all that. What's his background? Okay, well, and also he better not be married. That's another thing that happened quite often. In fact, my nephew's wife, she is the product of a relationship of her mother with an American soldier, and he was married. So, of course, he left and that was it. And my parents really were worried about my reputation. They said, if he leaves you, no German man wants to marry you after that, because you're damaged goods. So there were lots of tears and everything, and finally my parents caved in and let him come and visit. And the good news is he was a very charming man. He knew a little German. He was actually very talented with language. And he had a great sense of humor, so communicating with my brothers and my parents, they just kind of accepted him and trusted him, and we also had a chance to talk to his parents by phone, which was quite a big deal because in those days it was really expensive to call overseas. You had to make make arrangements and all that. So anyway, and he endeared himself to my family, and my husband came from a solid family. He was born and raised in Milton, Wisconsin. His father had a large farm. Of course, by that time he had retired and moved into town in a house that was built before the Civil War. And I'll tell you more about that. That's a really interesting place. His father was of German extraction. The entire family moved to the States from Frankfurt an der Oder. This is in eastern Germany. And his mother was from an old family of Irish and Scotch descent. She was very religious. She was a wonderful lady. And then he had 3 older sisters, and they all farmed. So, and I'm a city girl, right? Okay, so we got married. And in order to get married, you had to get approval from the commander. That was a formality, and I don't know how many commanders really denied that, but his commander didn't. You also had to fill out an application to the military they did a criminal and a background check. They wanted to know whether you are affiliated with any parties, not only yourself, but also the family, because it was too close still to World War II, and they still want to know if you ever were a member of the Nazi Party. And also they did a background check on my lifestyle. Am I a good girl or a bad girl? So that was another thing. We had a civil marriage in what we call the Standesamt. It was with the Justice of Peace, and I mean, it was nothing elaborate in there, but we had a great celebration. We had first a champagne breakfast, and then after that we all drove out to the lake at a restaurant and had a big family dinner. And then in the evening we went back to Munich and we had a big reception in the military hotel with all the colleagues and friends. And my uncle apologized to me. He said, "I'm really sorry, I'm wearing my old coat, but my aunt wouldn't come. I don't want them. I don't like Americans. She would not come to the wedding, but she wouldn't let him wear his good coat because she didn't trust them." She thought someone might take his coat. And then the other tradition in Germany is that when you get married and you find out where you're going to spend your first night, you do something to the beds, and so anyway, my husband's colleagues found out in the hotel where we were staying which room we had reserved, and so they went in there and they took the bed apart. They put an alarm clock under the bed that went off, I don't know, maybe at 4 o'clock in the morning, and I can't remember what else. But we were wise to that. We knew that they would do that, so we had another room. So that was not a problem. Our honeymoon we spent in Berchtesgaden. Berchtesgaden is in southeastern, the most southeastern part of Bavaria. And there was a hotel that was built by Hitler for his high-ranking party members, and that was taken over by the U.S. military, and that's where we had our honeymoon, right there on the lake. It was gorgeous. It was a little cold because we got married in November, but it didn't matter. I just remember it had the biggest bathtub. I mean, it was huge. I don't know why that's a big bag. That's the thing I still remember. So then we started a family in Munich. We were lucky we could move into military housing because my husband had, he was already a sergeant, and if you were a sergeant then you had access to military housing. We didn't have to live on the economy. And wow, that was great for me because where I lived in the apartment, we didn't have central heating. We just had stoves and heaters, and we didn't have running hot water. So all that was available to me. That was great. I bet I kept the temperature at 75. Just because. And there was lots of room, and the stove was big, and it had a double sink, and it was just wonderful. And the other wonderful thing is that the military even provided furniture. Can you imagine? Tables, couches, chairs, anything you needed. It was great, so it really helped us get started. In that apartment building where we lived, there were 6 other families, and that was my first exposure to American families. Before, it was just personnel. Now families from all all counties or all areas of America. It was my first meeting with a African-American family. Another one where the wife was German and he was African-American. And it was just great to get to see how they lived and what they did. And I learned about Thanksgiving and 4th of July, and I had my first turkey, and I had my first pumpkin pie, which I didn't like at all. But also, in addition to celebrating these holidays, I also celebrated the German holidays because my family was still there. Well, you know, I mean, I had everything. It was just great. We got together with my family a lot, my brothers, my parents, and then, so it was just wonderful. We had paper plates, paper napkins, my first coffee percolator. Hey, that was great. And I tasted my first shrimps, and I had celery and corn. And corn, why do you eat corn? That's what you feed to the animals. So it was really exciting, all that. And another exciting thing was what I really liked was the smells. Americans just smelled different. The soaps were different, and the toothpaste I loved because the German toothpaste was kind of chalky. It was just not the best. It was just fascinating. And then shopping at the commissary and at the PX. Wow. I mean, there was a lot of stuff there that I didn't see in Germany. It was just exciting. And $20, my God, it went forever. I mean, it was just no problem. Here, Jean would say, here, I have $20 and have fun in the PX. And I did. So I bought a lot of stuff. And also, of course, I mean, healthcare was not an issue for me, but the German dentists in those days did not clean teeth. Well, I had my first teeth cleaning. That was really exciting, too. I didn't even know people would do that. So then, of course, I got pregnant, and I had a child. Liliane was born in '61, and there was a picture of her. And again, I was very lucky that my parents were there to help out, and so again, I had it really, really good. And the baby stuff was so awesome. I just loved the baby buggy, that big thing, that a pram. My mom said, I don't know why you would get that. I don't like it. And the diapers were awesome. You had to learn how to fold them. And the safety pin, and my mom said, that's not safe. The you know, I have a safety pin on the side because Germans just swaddled their babies differently. And but I thought it was the greatest in the bottles and the formula and all that. So, but while I was pregnant, of course, I had to go see the doctor, and I had slacks on. I remember that. I walked in there, and a doctor walked up to me, and he said, "You cannot come in here with slacks. We have a dress code. No slacks. No slacks." So I had to leave, change, come back. Yeah, that was. They were pretty. No slacks in any. And not in the hospital, and not where they had the administration. And that's when I also, soon I found out about segregation, officers' clubs, enlisted men's clubs, and you probably remember in those days it started with Martin Luther King, and later on there were the riots, which is something I absolutely could not understand, because to me it didn't matter whether a person was black or Chinese or anything like that. I guess I was not indoctrinated by Hitler, because he felt very differently. Also, that the officers had different housing available to them. Most of, if they were of a higher rank, they had either duplex or they were had bigger apartments, but that didn't matter. One thing, I was asked to join the Wives Club of non-commissioned officers, and I had no clue what that would be or what I would have to do, and I just didn't understand it. And I said to Gene, "Do I have to join?" And he said, "No, you don't. You know, it's up to you if you want to do that." I guess they were just baking cookies or something like that. In '64, we moved to Würzburg, and he was transferred out, and this was the first time I felt isolated, because I was away from home, my family. I mean, Würzburg from Munich was maybe a 2.5-hour drive. It was not a big deal. We had a car, but still, being away from home was just so different, and I had to adjust to that. We again lived on a military installation and in an apartment, and but because I was away from home, we had to connect more with people, with friends, and so we would tour Würzburg, and this was the time when I was first introduced to wine. Coming from Munich, beer was really the staple. And Würzburg, I don't know if anyone has been in Würzburg, but it's a lovely town. It's on the Main River. It's kind of the most northern part of Bavaria, and it's famous for its wine country. It has a beautiful fortress there that was occupied by the Prince Electorate, which was a bishop or a cardinal, and it had also a very beautiful castle, and they had wonderful concerts. So I had a really, really good time. And the other thing was the people in the apartment building, we would share babysitting, and that helped. And we went to Munich quite often. Unfortunately, it didn't last too long, and we were transferred again, and this time to Baumholder. And Baumholder is in the Rhineland-Palatinate area, and it's up on a hill, and I swear I don't think I saw more than 10 sunny days when we lived there. It was always rainy and dreary, and it was just awful. When you came down into the valley, it was great, but Baumholder didn't have anything to offer, and I really hated it. Liliane, as she was growing up, we decided that we would put her into a German school so she would you know, remain fluent in German because being with my family, she had to be bilingual so they could communicate, and she was pretty good at that. So we put her into the German school, and she was in there about, oh, maybe 6 months or so, and we heard rumors that Jean might have to go to Vietnam, so friends and people Americans said, you know, it might not be a good idea to keep her in German school until you have to go back to the States because she might have a hard time adjusting to American schools. So we took her out and we put her into a military school. And of course she learned to read and write, and so I showed some of the stuff that she did to the teacher, and they thought she was a 3rd grader. She was just a 1st grader. So anyway, she was there, and then we did get orders to, Jean got orders to go to Vietnam. By that time I was pregnant with my 2nd child, and so that delayed it a little bit until she was born. And we left Germany in, yeah, she was born in '68, so we left in January of '69, and yeah, in '69. But before that, in '68, when Audrey was born, she was near Baumholder, and what's so interesting about that is when Audrey and her husband were sent to Germany for their tour of duty, they ended up in Spangdahlem, and Spangdahlem is very close to where she was born. So when she was processing in, they asked her, "What's your place of birth?" And she said it was Baumholder, and the lady looked at her and she said, "Baumholder, that's just 10 minutes from here." So she lived there for 9 years, close to 9 years, close to where she was born. Isn't that something? Yeah, okay. So we left Germany in January, and the reason I could not stay behind because I was not an American citizen, and the military did not provide for families at that time. I had to go back to the States, and the decision was to stay with Jean's family in Milton. Before I could leave Germany, I had to apply for a visa and a health certificate so I could enter the United States. I still remember when we went to the train station, my parents were with me, and my mom cried so much, she said, "I will never see you again," and it was just really traumatic, but my dad said, "Don't worry about it, you'll see her again," and we assured her. I entered the United States. I still remember coming in over New York, and I saw the skyscrapers, and I saw the Statue of Liberty and the Empire State Building, and I thought, that's just awesome, awesome, awesome. But I landed in New Jersey, and I had to go through immigration, and my kids went with my husband, and I was separated with the foreigners, with the immigrants, and so it took a while to process through, and finally made it, and then friends of ours picked us up with their car, and on my way to LaGuardia Airport, going up that freeway, I guess, I've never seen so much trash. It was really a letdown. I was really disappointed. It was not a pretty sight, and it was a shock. But I guess that's how it is. I saw a lot of billboards and gaudy signs, and I saw all those big American cars in pink and light blue and turquoise, and that was a different sight too. Then from LaGuardia we had to fly into Milwaukee, and Jean's oldest sister met us, picked us up, and like I said, it was the first time I saw her in real. Of course I saw pictures of her, and she said, well, we have to, from the airport, and then we're heading to Milton, and to me a city was a city, right? I mean, cities have big buildings and they have apartment buildings. Well, I was going to Milwaukee and I kept on saying, where's the city? And she said, this is the city. Well, all I saw was family homes with front yards. I just couldn't picture a city like that. So that was another eye-opener for me. We arrived in Clinton and the family welcomed us with open arms, because they were all delighted to finally see their grandkids. And because we arrived in January, I don't know, maybe the 10th or 15th, I don't remember, they still had the Christmas tree up for us and there were still presents under the tree, so we really felt welcome. The problem that we faced with, though, is all the stuff that we had to have packed up and was sent to the States got lost. And it was clothes in there and, I mean, everything. It got lost, I couldn't find it. So Gene was to process out about 2 weeks after that, but because our household goods had not arrived and had not been found, he could stay a little longer, which was good for me because it was really hard for me to adjust being there. It was, I don't know, I felt like I was in a different world. I felt very uncomfortable and even though they were so nice and generous, their lifestyle and the way they lived was so alien. Because, well, one was because they were farmers, so they had a different cycle almost. But I'll get to that later. So anyway, I had to wear borrowed clothing, and the neighbors helped out with baby clothes and all that. So it worked out okay, and luckily they finally found our stuff. The box had been broken open and some of the stuff got lost. But at least we got most of it. So that was okay. So then Gene left for Tacoma, Washington to go to his training for Vietnam. And he really fell in love with Tacoma. He thought that was a great city because, well, it was in February, it was already relatively warm there, and Wisconsin had snow up to here, and it was cold and out there, no snow, and it was mild. So he said to me that when he retires from the military, that's where he wants to live, and that was fine with me. So he ended up in Saigon, and he was with the military police, and even though we communicated with tapes, we would send each other tapes, and I also did that with my parents. He never really talked of what he was doing in Saigon. There were just times when I didn't hear from him, and then when he came back I found out that he had to go on these patrols up the Mekong, right, Mekong River, which was not a good thing. Luckily he did not get injured, but it came out later that he suffered of the effects of Agent Orange and all that. So while I was in Wisconsin, the military informed spouses that if they are not American citizens, they had the opportunity to apply for citizenship, and there was not that period of waiting. So I got the booklet and I read through everything, and Gene's cousins sponsored me. And when I was ready to take my test, they took me up to Milwaukee and brought me in there, and there was this official sitting there, and he asked me several questions. And I really expected a lot of questions, but really it wasn't. All he wanted me to answer about the 10th Amendment, whether I knew who the first president was, and when the Civil War was, the time period, and then he gave me something to read, to see whether I could read and understand English. And he said, "You're good, goodbye." And then we will notify you when you get to be sworn in. That took maybe, I think it was about 2 months. I was notified to report into the courthouse in Milwaukee, and along with my sponsors, walked in there. There were probably, in my opinion, 1,000,000 people, but it was probably just 200. It was just so big and so overwhelming, and I was just really, really excited. And when they were swearing us in, I could not stop coughing. I just coughed and coughed and coughed. It was the most embarrassing thing. I never forget that. So when I was sworn in an American citizen, I had to disavow of all connection with the German citizenship. So I had to give up my German citizenship. That's what they said. That was okay. So living in Wisconsin, like I said, that was an experience. The house that my parents-in-law occupied or lived in, they owned that. It was an old house. It was like pre-Civil War. And I had a dog, and the dog was chewing on the wall, and I found out that it had mats of straw on there, and then it was plastered over. Have you seen anything like that? It was just unbelievable. And then in the basement, it still had the tree trunks, just the bark was taken off, and that's what held up the house. And it had a huge heater in there. It looked like an octopus. It had all of these big things, and my father-in-law would go down there and stoke it, and it had that old-time washing machine and a wringer. That's where I did my diapers, and I finally gave up on that. Then I went to a laundromat. That was much easier. But also, this was the first time I lived in a house with a garden, which I thought was just awesome. I could, go outside and sit outside in the garden with the kids, and I didn't realize how hot and humid and muggy and buggy the summers were in Wisconsin. And my parents-in-law just could not understand why I was out there with the kids. How can you stand it? Well, being from Germany, we want fresh air, but in those days, you stayed inside. And that's another experience my parents had, because they came and visited, and they would take their afternoons stroll and walks, and people would stop their cars and say, "Can we give you a ride?" We just didn't take walks. We just didn't do that. Not there. My father-in-law was a true farmer at heart. And he had a huge garden. He grew corn, he had strawberries, everything you can possibly imagine, with a big orchard of fruit trees. But his hobby was fancy pheasants. He had a whole row of cages that was probably from here down to the display case. And he had all kinds of pheasants. He had a swinehole and the one with the golden caps. I don't even remember the names, but they were just beautiful. And he also had peacocks that were roaming free, and they would go, "Help, help, help." And then he had tumbling pigeons that he had in a case, and he would sometimes let them out, and he would fly up and go, boom, and then come down. It was just really cool. And because of the license he had, sometimes the game warden would bring him animals that were injured. And I had the good fortune that the game warden brought a baby raccoon. And so my father-in-law said, "Would you like to raise it?" And I said, "I'd love to." So he set everything up, and he told me what to do, and I would get up and feed the little raccoon from the bottle, and it was just a great experience. And then as he got older, and then of course he put him out in a cage, and he would wait for my father-in-law to come and feed him, and my father-in-law would always have marshmallows in his pocket. And the raccoon would come up and reach into his pocket and take out the marshmallows. And then one day came the sad day when my father-in-law said, "Gotta let him go. He's mature, he's getting mean, aggressive. That's the time they need to go." And see, he put him in a cage and drove him out in the country and let him go. But he also had another really exciting pet. He had a squirrel monkey. And the squirrel monkey was in a big cage in the kitchen. And Audrey, my little one, loved the squirrel monkey. She was just a baby, and she would like to touch him, but he was a little unpredictable. And so she would take my sister-in-law's finger and put her finger through the cage, just in case he would bite. But the monkey was funny. He had that old tennis ball that was partly open, and he would take it and put it over his head and then turn up one side and look out. So that was kind of fun. Occasionally the monkey got out, and then it was a really hard time to catch him and put him back into its cage. So it was pretty wild. Like I said, my mother-in-law was religious, and the reverend would come. She was a Methodist, and he would come in for a visit. And I remember when my parents were there for a visit, I had that little apartment upstairs, and my mother-in-law would call up and she said, "The Reverend is here." And my mom said, "What is the Reverend?" And I had to explain to her. So anyway, on Sundays we always went to the Methodist church, and that's where Audrey and Liliane were baptized, because I didn't have Liliane baptized in Germany. And then she went to Sunday school and all that. Let's see. Okay, I didn't have a car, but I used my father-in-law's car. It was an old one, kind of turquoise. And I would go to Kmart, drive to Janesville, which was about, what, 4 miles, I think. And didn't like to ride with my father-in-law, because when he drove, he would always look to the side and say, "Oh, look at the Johnson's farms, they got their hay up," or something like that, and his car would go this way now. And then if there was a fire or anything like that, man, he jumped into that car and he went right out there to see what was going on. But I also got to drive the car, and one day I went to the post office and parked across the street, facing the park, which was a little lower, and went into the post office, did my business, and came out, and car was gone. I went back in and said, "Somebody stole my car." He said, "Not in Milton." "But it's gone, it's gone, it's gone." And then a man came in and he said, "There's a car down in the park." What kind of, I said, "Oh, what kind of a car?" I said, "Well, it's a turquoise one." It was my father-in-law car. I had it in instead of park, I had it in neutral, and it rolled very slowly down, and it stopped right in front of a tree. The tree was a little bent. Luckily, it was a small tree. So I was extremely embarrassed. I had to back out that car and drove home, and I told my father-in-law, I said, "What happened?" "Well," he said, "you better go to the police and tell them and pay your fine." So I had to pay a fine to the park department for damaging the little tree. Probably was no thicker than that, but anyway, it was a good lesson. I also had a cat, and that not the poor cat, but that naughty cat would like to chase the peacocks, and then they would get really nervous and they flew up into the trees, and then I would try to get them down, and it was just pretty exciting, but it was fun. My sisters-in-law, of course, like I told you, they all own farms, and they were still, so that was a really neat experience to go to the farm, watch them milk the cows mechanically. I mean, I only thought that cows are being milked by hand, but not there. No, you had to wash the udder, and then you had to put the suction cup up, and then it pumped out the milk. It was the coolest thing to watch. And then he had the manure was pushed over to the end of the, I don't know, to the middle of the barn, and then pushed it all there, and then he pushed a button and a chain carried it out. And I thought, wow, that's really easy. I said, then the German farmers' wives, they were hard-working women, and usually the one I knew, she looked like a real farmer's wife, you know. But my sisters-in-law, they had earrings, and they were really, they were gorgeous women, just so different. But the thing I had a really hard time was the way they ate. Because they had the tradition, they always ate those huge breakfasts, and I wasn't used to that. you know. And then the other thing was is when they got together 10 o'clock at night before everybody went home, they had lunch. Oh my God, there were cold cuts and there were desserts and there was this and that. And before lunch you ate popcorn. I don't know where they put it, but that was just too much for me. But my sister-in-law were just great ladies, and and so were my brothers-in-law. It was just really, really nice. And they taught me a lot. They taught me about cooking. I had a chance to taste smelt. I had catfish, all that stuff that I never had. And let's see. Okay. And my mother-in-law, because my father-in-law, they had a relatively large farm, and in those days they would bring in people to help with the harvest, the threshing and all that. And she would always prepare the food for them. And I guess once you do that, you always do that. She would make rolls, and she had that kitchen table piled full of rolls, and then luckily my sisters-in-law would take most of the rolls with her, because, I mean, who would eat all the rolls? But man, she made big batches. And she told me all about what it was like, and my father-in-law about the team of mules he had, and the pictures, and it was just a real experience. It was great. And I tried my hand at gardening, and it was not a good thing. I was not successful at all. I had no clue how to garden. But my father-in-law said, go ahead, try, see what happens. Nothing happened. The other thing was, you know, in Germany you had access to some TV, but for the military, but I think they only had maybe 2 hours of it. I don't remember exactly. But my God, in Wisconsin I could watch TV, and I loved Beverly Hillbillies and Green Acres, and of course the girls watched their cartoons, and I also watched The Landing on the Moon, so that was great. My mother-in-law watched the soaps, which did not make any sense to me. I did not like the books. And since Liliane was growing older, I became a Girl Scout leader, and that was a new experience for me. You know, what do? Well, you just entertain the kids and do projects with them. Okay, I can do that. So that was fun. We met at the old depot, and we did projects, and the girls got their badges, and it was fun. And then I got word that I can meet Jean in Hawaii for R&R, and that was really awesome. So I flew to Hawaii, and we met in Honolulu, and it was only five days and 6 nights. I guess the military had a reason for that. 5 days and 6 nights. It was wonderful. We went to a luau, and we were at the beach, and we went to the cultural center in Hawaii, which was a wonderful experience. And then when I was in Hawaii with Al, I wanted to go to that culture center, but it got so expensive. I thought, I'm not going to spend $80 to go through that. I've seen it before. But it was really nice, and of course saying goodbye was very, very hard, and it was all, you know, all these soldiers were getting back on the planes, and their wives were crying, and some of them probably never saw their husband again. As I mentioned earlier, my parents came for a visit, and this was their first airplane ride, and it was exciting for them. I swear my dad probably took 100 pictures of the clouds coming over. Oh my God, clouds from the top. Who would think that? My sister-in-law was wonderful. She made it possible for my parents to see Chicago. She took us into Chicago. We went to the Prudential Building. And in Chicago was the first time I saw the skyscrapers from the bottom. I only saw them from the top coming into New York. Yeah. So that was, whoa, that was really something. My dad loved it too. I don't know how many pictures he took of that. And also, I had a chance to go to Dubuque. I said to my sister-in-law, I would love to see the Mississippi. I mean, Mississippi, the river of the United States. That's absolutely awesome. Oh, she said, Dubuque isn't too far. So she took me to Dubuque. Who would have thought that I would live there so close, eventually, down the road? It was just great. It was not quite as wide as I expected it in Dubuque. I had a chance to go to the Playboy Club in Geneva. Oh boy, those bunnies really knew how to show off their stuff. That club was really neat. It had a huge golf course, of course, and then in the club, if you went downstairs, it had a swimming pool, you know, like in an aquarium. So you could have drinks and you could watch the bunnies swim. That was really neat. And also in Wisconsin, I had my first experience of a drive-in movie. You can go to the movie in the car? Really? Oh yeah, you can. And they brought the box and you hung it on the side. And first movie I saw was Romeo and Juliet. Loved it. The kids slept in the back, and my sister-in-law and her husband, we watched that. It was great. And of course, the other real treat was go to a drive-in to have a hamburger and a pop and some fries. 25 cents going to Edgerton because my sister-in-law said that's where the best hamburgers are. Oh yeah. And then Jean's family loved to play cards. So they taught me how to play euchre, and that was lots of fun. We played euchre whenever we had a chance, except on Sundays. Mother-in-law did not allow that. On Sunday, you don't play euchre. And so we did it on Saturday. Yeah, so honestly, I was not homesick when I was in Wisconsin because I knew we would be going back to Germany. That was one thing we were guaranteed, that after the tour of duty in Vietnam, we could go back to Germany. And we were lucky, we were stationed in Munich again. So Jean came and we flew, we had to fly from Chicago to New Jersey again. And in New Jersey we had to stay in a hotel and then catch a flight out into Frankfurt. Well, we were in a hotel and the alarm didn't go off, and we woke up and I think we had maybe a half an hour to get ready and catch a cab to take us to the airport. We made it. We got to the airport, we lined up, we just lined up and we got on the plane because it was a chartered flight. And I said to Jean, how come there are so many sailors on that plane? I don't know. We're going into Frankfurt, right? So anyway, we're up there. We're up there for about a half an hour and so, and then the pilot announces we should be landing in Granada at such and such time. What? That's in southern Spain, okay? And I said that explains the sailors. So, we were on the wrong plane. And it being a military plane, nobody checked. I mean, you didn't have a ticket, you know. So anyway, we landed there in Granada, and then we had to wait and get a plane into Frankfurt. Well, meanwhile, of course, my family, they all expected us to arrive in Munich at a certain time. Of course, we didn't arrive at that time. There were no cell phones, nothing like that. So that was pretty traumatic for my parents, but then everything was okay. We got into Frankfurt, where we were picked up by a soldier with whom Jean will be working, and they drove us then down to Munich, and everything was okay. So that was exciting. Our time in Munich was probably the best time because we were kind of settled. We toured all of Germany. We went to England, we went to Belgium, we went to Sweden, Denmark, Italy, everywhere. It was just wonderful. My sister-in-law and her husband came over for the Olympics in '72. And so we went with them to England, and my brother-in-law was English, and he didn't like England, so he said, I know now why they left. And we went to Antwerp, to the diamond bourse, because my sister-in-law wanted to buy, what do you call it, a cocktail ring? Something like that. And the diamond bourse was kind of like an enclosed area, and when we got there, there were a lot of soldiers there with machine guns, and we thought, what's going on? Well, that was the time when the terrorist attack started, and they said there is an alarm, there's a terrorist attack, maybe, we don't know, and you can go in, but, you know, on your own. Well, we did, because she wanted that ring, and we had no other chance to come back, so everything was fine, and she got her ring. And now one of my daughters has her ring because she passed away. And let's see, where else? Oh, we went to Berlin. That was exciting, because at that time the wall was still up and we had to go through Checkpoint Charlie. And being in the military, to go through Berlin, Gene had to wear his uniform, and he was free to go in. And the exchange rate for East German marks and West German marks was really 1 to 4. 4 East German for 1 West German, but if you did it officially, it was 1 to 1. Well, we exchanged it the unofficial way, and then so Gene put the money in his shoes and he went into Berlin, but I had to go through the customs, so to speak, and it took forever to get through there, because the border guards did not, you had to turn in your passport, and they did not take, you know, from the bottom and so on. They would look at the stack and it would be like this, and then they would kind of go through like that and then pull one out from the middle. So you never knew when your turn was. So anyway, I finally made it across there, and I met up with Gene, and we got into a cab, and the cab driver drove us around East Berlin, and it was, compared to West Berlin, it was really run down. I mean, it just was not the same, and you still saw damage from World War II, and there were still areas that had not been rebuilt. And then he took us to the shopping center, and Marlies, what were they called?
Kurfürstendamm?
No, the KP or something like that. Anyway.
KD.
Oh, KD. And it was in the summer, no air conditioning, and it just was not very comfortable. But I said to Gene, I want some Meissen porcelain. So they had, because, you know, I wanted a souvenir. So we went to a Meissen porcelain store, and I picked out something very nice, and Gene took the money that we brought, and he was going to pay for it. And she said, where's your receipt from, you know, when you exchanged the money in the German bank? Well, we didn't have that. They wouldn't sell it to us. So, and we didn't want to bring all that money back with us, so because we went to a restaurant and we gave a big tip, and then we gave a big tip in the toilet, because when you went to the restroom you have to pay. And so that lady was very happy about it. And then on the way back, I had to process through again, and that's when the border guards called me into an interrogation room and wanted to know all kinds of things from me. Why was I in Berlin, and what does my husband do in the military, and where's your family? I mean, all kinds of stupid stuff. And finally, they let me go. Because before you went into East Berlin, the military told you that if anybody asks you about what your husband does in the military, you don't tell them. you know, you just don't tell them. So that was fine. So it was a good experience. And then the Olympics in '72, that was another thing, because my husband was with the military police, and you know, there was that terrorist attack where these Israeli athletes were murdered, and he was involved in that. And the military installation, or the housing area where we lived, was blocked off. They took tanks and put them right across the roads, so you could not get in. And if you wanted to come in, you had to show a pass, and it was really controlled for about 2 weeks. But I had a chance to go to the closing ceremony, and also to see the American basketball team defeat the Russians. And that was really exciting. Yeah. The family, I helped out at school, and we did a lot of things in Germany, and I still remember when they had the oil shortage. Do you remember that? When people would line up at the gas stations? Well, that didn't happen in Germany. You know what the Germans did? You were not allowed to drive on Sundays. No cars. So we would take hikes on the Autobahn. It was great. It was just really nice, very peaceful, and if you really had an emergency, then that was a different story, but you didn't have to go anywhere. You did your shopping before that, and it was just no big problem. Then we were from Munich transferred to Grafenwöhr, and Grafenwöhr is a big NATO training center. It's a huge base and a very small town. There's a lot going on because they had, you know, a NATO base. They brought in a lot of soldiers from other countries, and so Jean was gone a lot, and we had a little summer home, and we had a rabbit for the kids, and when we didn't stay at the summer home, I had to take the rabbit to the apartment, and we had a big balcony, and I had a doghouse on the balcony, hoping that the rabbit would be in there. But he didn't. He'd like to sit on top of the doghouse like Snoopy. And so we were on the ground floor, and he would sit up there, and people would walk by and take a double take. He said, "Am I seeing a rabbit?" And there was a lady in our stairwell. She liked to drink, and she came to the front door one time, and she must have had quite a few. And the rabbit was behind me, and she said, "What is that?" And I said, "That's a rabbit." She said, "Oh my God, I thought I'm seeing things." I never forget that. That was really funny. That was also in Grafenwöhr when I met my best friend. She was from the Frankfurt area. Her husband was with the tankers, and he was on maneuvers all the time. So she and her 3 girls were alone most of the time, and I was alone most of the time. So we would get together, and we became the happy hookers. Not what you think, but we hooked drugs. And that's what we call it. And we had a really fun time, and also fun with all the colleagues. We would take the kids sledding, we would go skating, and it was just fun. But unfortunately at that time, my husband really started to gamble, and he would get together with other gamblers and would sometimes gamble an entire weekend. Start Friday night and not come home until Sunday afternoon. He played cards. We did go on vacation to Italy and stayed at the near Venice for a month, and it was great for the kids, you know, swimming in the Mediterranean, and exposed them to a lot of things in Venice. We toured, and they got to see all that, so the kids still fondly remember that time. Later on, because I was not busy, and then I decided to sign up with the education department, and I started to teach English to civilians, and then also got hired by the Army to teach Head Start to non-commissioned officers and to officers. And that was a wonderful experience for me, because it gave me an opportunity to share my German heritage, the customs, teach German, but also take personnel on tours. And of course the most favorite tour was to the brewery, because after the brewery they all had a chance to get some beer. And that was very popular. They also liked to get the liquor candy filled, the candies, you know, the chocolates that are filled with liquor. And I said, you probably get sick before you get drunk if you eat all that. but I took them to restaurants so they would learn how to order food and understand that, and also, you know, how to ask for directions and stuff like that. That was a good experience. I also took them to Bayreuth and to Nuremberg because of the proximity, and in Bayreuth was a wonderful opera house, which was still original, because most of the opera houses were damaged by fire because they used, you know, candles, but that one was still original, and it was built by the sister of Frederick the Great. So it was from the early 18th century. And then they had another castle, Hermitage, where I like to take them because they had a fountain that was that spouted unpredictably. So you could take them in and all of a sudden it would start to spout and they would get wet. So that was good for me. I knew not to go in there. And so I gave them a little history of, you know, to kind of familiarize them with it. What they really liked is go on the stage of the opera house, and then the other group would be in the back and they would whisper something on the stage and the back could hear it. Great acoustics. Okay, well, it was time for Gene to retire. He served 23 years in the military. He said, I've had it, because we were supposed to go to El Paso. And he said, I'm done. So that meant we had to say goodbye to the military life, which I thought was very easy and very good to me. And we ended up in the state of Washington in '77. It was a big change for Gene after serving in the military for so long, switching to civilian life, and then also for me, because the military pretty much took care of you, but now we were on our own. We rented a house, got the kids in school, kids liked it, so that was a plus. And Gene went to school, went back to school to get a bachelor's degree in criminal justice, because that was kind of his field. And I decided, keep myself busy, I'll go to school too. By golly, I can do that. So I did that, and then I started to work part-time for General Electric, and, you know, time went on. But I was extremely homesick. I was so homesick because I knew I was never going back to Germany to live there. And I felt like I was in prison. And it was really, really hard, and of course the weather didn't help much either, because it rains a lot in Tacoma. But I had good friends and they helped me over it, and of course going to school and going to work, finally, over time, I finally felt at home. The only sad thing is that Gene and I drifted apart, and eventually it ended in a divorce. My parents came practically every year, and I went to Germany after 5 years. I waited 5 years until I went back to Germany, and that's when Chernobyl blew up, and then Chernobyl, and then also Mount St. Helens. So both times I was in Germany. I missed that. I missed the one in Tacoma, in Washington, but I didn't miss Chernobyl. And I remember in Munich, they said, don't drink any milk, and don't eat anything that grows above ground. So I think I will finish now, because now I'm an American. I feel at home here. It was a long road. I think I was extremely lucky. And I thank all the people that helped me along in my journey to become an American. And just quickly, eventually Alan and I got together and we moved to Clinton in '91. And I can be very honest about this, because Gene and I, we both were divorced, and neither one of us were really interested in getting married. So we lived together in Seattle, where I worked for the University of Washington. And then when Gene took on a consulting job in Chicago, eventually he said, we need to move to the Midwest.
That's L. That's L now.
Did I say Gene? I'm glad I didn't say George. Oh my God, Gene, no, yeah, Alan. And so anyway, when we decided to move to Clinton, he said, you know, we better get married because the people in Clinton are very conservative. So Ralph and Nora experienced that. They are our neighbors, and they invited us over for drinks, and it was probably the second week we were in Clinton, and our other neighbors were there, and we told about the kids and this and that, and finally the neighbor said, so how long have you been married? And Al said, 2 weeks. So anyway, so here I am in Clinton, and this is my home now, and I like it, and I feel comfortable being an American, and I thank you for listening to my life story. I appreciate it. Am I good? Do you have any questions? No?
You were very thorough.
Of course you have a question.
Do you think the bathtub at Berchtesgaden might have been sized to fit Hermann Goering?
I knew you would say. I don't think so, because Hermann Goering had a gorgeous house there. I don't think he stayed there, but maybe a lot of those officials were on the heavy side. I don't know. I don't know. It was just, or because Hitler thought big. Everything had to be big. So it's funny that I still remember that bathtub. I don't remember anything else. But oh yeah, we both fit into it. Oh yeah, we did. It was fun. If you want to, I have some pictures of my girls, of course, and then here are some pictures of.
Where do your daughters live?
Okay, my oldest daughter lives in Selah, Washington, with her husband. Her husband is captain of wildlife management for that area. He has 4 counties. They have 2 grown sons. Her oldest son is a landscape architect. He works in Spokane. And the other boy is at the Art Institute in Portland, Oregon. And then my younger daughter, who was in Germany for the last 9 years, and she loves it there. She wants to go back. I don't know if she can, but she just moved to Maryland. She works at Fort Meade. She's a judiciary, and she has 3 little boys, and the 3 little boys were with us last summer when she was moving. Yeah, and Liliani is an office manager for a dental office. So, yeah.
Do you still play euchre?
You know, I haven't recently, but Alan's grandson said, let's play euchre, but the euchre he plays, it has several decks of cards, and we just played with a small deck, and you have, 10 points, and you use the 4 and the 6 to keep track. Anyway, that's the one I know. I love it. Now we play dominoes and we play canasta.
We play euchre Thursdays and Saturdays at 11 o'clock at Cousins Submarine Sandwich
Oh,
Shop.
you do? Oh,
So
my
you're
God.
welcome anytime.
Welcome. Oh my God, yeah. Oh, besides euchre, we played 500 and we played pinochle. Yeah. Oh, yeah.
Thank you so much for being here. Trudy, did you do a count?
Yes.
Thank you. I'm guessing there might be a cookie yet left, Trudy, and a little bit of coffee, so feel free. Thanks. Please come again.